From the Sudbury.com newsroom, good afternoon. I'm Callum Rodia. In just a moment, we will take you live to the Holiday Inn, where Ontario Premier Kathleen Wynne and Minister of Energy Glenn Thibeault are slated to address the Sudbury Chamber of Commerce with a fireside chat. Premier Wynne was a late addition to the program for this event, and this marks her first visit to Greater Sudbury in over a year, which is not altogether surprising. Wynne's popularity is low in Sudbury. A by-election scandal involving the Premier's former Deputy Chief of Staff, Pat Sorbera, and prominent local businessman Jerry Loughy Jr. is still fresh in the minds of voters, and widely unpopular hydro policies have seen support for the Liberal government plummet province-wide. Most polls show that if an election were held tomorrow, Wynne and her government would be swiftly defeated. Now, we have no word on whether Wynne or Thibeault will address either of those issues, but with an election looming, they most certainly will be looking to shore up Liberal support in the riding. Sudbury.com is bringing you full coverage of this event. Stay with us as we take you live to the Holiday Inn.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bienvenue, Annie. My name is Michael McNamara, and I'm the first Vice Chair at the Greater Sudbury Chamber of Commerce and a lawyer at Conroy Scott. I would like to extend a special welcome today to our guest speaker, the Honourable Kathleen Wynne, Premier of Ontario, and the Honourable Glenn Thibeault, Minister of Energy, MPP for Sudbury. We are delighted to have both of you with us today, and thank you very much for joining us. I would also like to acknowledge some other special guests we have joining us today. Nathalie Desrosiers, MPP, Ottawa-Vanier. Paul Lefebvre, MPP, Sudbury. MP, pardon me. Councillor Al Sizer. Thank you. Councillor Jocelyn Landry-Altman. Thank you. Councillor Evelyn Duchessac, and Councillor Mark Signoretti. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'd also like to welcome and thank the sponsors for being here today and for sponsoring this event. Our gold sponsors are CN and Sudbury Integrated Nickel Operations at Glencore Company. So thank you very much to our gold sponsors. I'd also like to thank our silver sponsors, Cambrian College, Collège Boreal, Huntington University, and Greater Sudbury Utilities. Thank you very much. I'd like to remind everyone that without your generous support, days like today would certainly not be possible, and we'd again like to thank you for your commitment to the Chamber. It is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers. To begin, we'll hear from Premier Wynne, followed by a brief discussion where we'll open up the floor to questions from the audience. So first, Premier Wynne, if you'd like to share some opening remarks, that'd be great.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for being here. Merci beaucoup pour votre présence ici. Je suis très heureuse d'être ici encore une fois à Sudbury, and I look forward to the questions. I see lots of familiar faces, and really appreciate you being here today. I know today was supposed to be all about energy and all about Glenn. So, I appreciate, Glenn, you sharing your time. It's like we're in the legislature. The speaker has given us time, and you're sharing it with me, and I appreciate it. But Glenn will be able to answer in detail questions that you have about electricity pricing and about the Fair Hydro Plan. But you know, it really that initiative really fits into a much broader picture that we're dealing with here in Ontario. And I first of all want to acknowledge that I recognize that there are different challenges in different parts of the province, and that the North has different challenges than other parts parts of the province. Having said that, it's our responsibility as members of the government to work to make sure that everyone in Ontario is able to thrive, that government, which in my opinion and in my practice exists to help people, exist to be a force for good and do the things that we can't do by ourselves. And so we need to do that across the province. We've just introduced a budget bill. Actually, we've passed a budget bill that demonstrates that the province is doing well. It's the first balanced budget in more than a decade, and in almost a decade. And so we are now in a position to make sure that we look at the economy. We see that it is growing across the province. We're outstripping growth in the United States, in Europe. So Ontario is doing very, very well nationally and internationally. But not everyone is sharing in that economic well-being evenly. There are definitely sectors, regions, particular industries that are not doing as well as others. And we were just talking about base metals this morning. And, you know, there are real challenges that are being confronted by particular parts of the economy and particular groups within the economy. And so our role is to make sure that we use the capacity of the province to address those challenges. So whether it means 25% off people's electricity bills across the province, and then working with business to figure out how we make electricity costs reasonable. Whether it's OHIP plus pharmacare, which I talked about this morning at Health Sciences North, where we are starting in January, kids from 0 to their 25th birthday, so kids and young people 24 years or younger will be able to access free medication as of January 1st, 2018. That will mean, like the reduction in electricity bills, that people will have more capacity to make ends meet in their families, or whether it's free tuition. I see a number of you are here from the post-secondary sector, so you know that over 200,000 young people in September are going to have access to post-secondary, free tuition or better than free tuition, who otherwise wouldn't necessarily go to post-secondary, or who would go but would be facing a huge debt when they graduate. So all of those things are being put in place because we recognize that the economy is changing. We recognize that it's uncertain. You know, as the Chamber, and I'll just end on this, that the Changing Workplaces Review was released today. There are a number of recommendations that are now in the public realm, and we'll be responding to those very soon. That is a review that's gone on for 2 years, and it's an acknowledgement that our labor laws and our workplace laws have not been reviewed together for many, many years, and the workplace is changing. More people are struggling with contract, part-time work, low-wage work, and they're not able to find the security that I think we expect in a province and a country as wealthy as ours, that they would be able to. So technology has a role to play in that, but international competition has a role to play in that. So we, as government, have to find a way to work with business, because you create the jobs. We get that. You create the jobs, but our role is to make sure that we put the supports in place for families, for individuals, and at the same time allow your businesses to thrive. That's a challenging balance to find. I get that, and the only way that we will find it is by working with you. And you've always been great partners. The Chambers of Commerce across the province have worked very, very closely with government. We appreciate that, and we also appreciate that there are times when we prod and push each other, and so I look forward to the discussion today. And I certainly, just to go back to something that I said earlier, that I don't believe in change for the sake of change. I believe in change when there's a pressing need, when someone is not being treated fairly, when a segment of our population is not being treated fairly, and we need to find the adjustments to address that. So I look forward to the discussion, and again, thank you so much for being here. Merci.
Thank you very much, Premier Wynne. Minister Thibeault, I'd be happy to turn it over to you for some opening remarks.
I don't think anyone's here to hear me speak. So, Well, yeah. So, but I am happy to be here again. Honored to have you here in Sudbury Premier, and Natalie, thanks for coming. C'est très important pour moi pour pratiquer le français, et avec un autre député dans la chambre, c'est très important pour moi. It is. I'm going to be happy to take any energy questions at some point. But I am thrilled to be able to continue to represent you. And I look around this room and I can go from table to table and talk about some of the issues that we've been working on together. And I think that's the important thing for me to demonstrate, especially when my boss is here, is that we work together as a community when there are issues that need to be overcome. And so if it was electricity, if it's the Ring of Fire, if it's working for our mining communities, if it's our cultural communities and our healthcare sector, we all come together, we work together, and that's, I think, demonstrative of us and I think as the government. And being able to advocate on behalf of some of the programs that we're really working for and need here in the North. And I know the Premier has spoken to that, but please, if you have a question that you would like to ask, feel free to do that. I know sometimes you wait until the end and try to approach us and run up and say, hey, Glenn, I want to talk to you about Dan Melanson's great idea about bringing helicopter training here to Northern Ontario and into Sudbury. And yes, it's a little plug for Dan and his great project, but at the same time, as I said, we can do that from table to table. And with that, I look forward to being able to have a further discussion and hear what the Premier has to say and hear from your questions. So thanks, everyone. Nice seeing so many people. We brought the lights out, so something must be going on today.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Yeah.
We will begin shortly with an open question and answer style period. However, I do have a few questions that I'd like to get things started with.
Put the chair on the stage so we can.
That's right. The first concerns Canada-U.S. relations.
Right.
On Thursday, the Trump administration began the process of renegotiating NAFTA. How do you anticipate the renegotiations will affect Greater Sudbury as well as the rest of Ontario as a whole?
So we are working very closely with our federal counterparts, as you can imagine. The feds take the lead on this discussion. We will, and I've said this to the Prime Minister with my colleague premiers, that we look forward to being very close to the table. If we're not at the table, we're looking forward to being very close to the table, because there are there are issues that Ontario is very concerned about. Obviously, we're concerned about manufacturing. We're concerned about supply management in our agriculture sector. So there are some issues that are very, very immediate for us. Having said that, we're going beyond just that, working with the feds. We're taking initiative on our own. So you may be aware that there was a Buy America moment in New York a few weeks ago, where the New York State budget was going through, and there was a threat of a Buy America clause to be put into their budget that would have severely hampered procurement on both sides of the border, and would have put at risk jobs both in New York and in Ontario. So we had people on the ground. We have a representative in Washington, Monique Smith, who some of you will know, who works very, very closely with the ambassador, but represents Ontario's interests. And so she was there in New York, and as it turned out, we managed to get that Buy America clause pulled out of the New York budget. So I use that as an example, because we are being very, very hands-on in this process, because it is NAFTA, but it's also border adjustment taxes. It's also other tariffs and protectionist initiatives that might be taken. So we're paying very, very close attention to those. I'm talking to governors on a weekly basis. There are 28 states for whom Ontario is their number one or number two trading partner. 20, we're their number one. 8, we're their number two. And so I'm working through those governors, talking to them about our shared interests. And for the most part, the governors, most of whom that I've spoken to so far are Republican. They really understand that. They understand that we have an integrated economy, and so they are as worried about protectionism as we are. And so I will continue to to play that role, to reach out. I'll be going to the National Governors Association later this year, and I will be making the case for our integrated economies. We are free traders. Are there things that we could do that might tweak NAFTA, that might actually put us in a better position? Yes, and we're working with the feds on that. But overall, we need that market and we need that exchange. And so I'll be continuing to work to make sure that our interests are protected.
That's great to know that you're working really with the governors and on a state-by-state basis, because I think that's very important. Thanks. I'd like to shift topics now and move over to the Changing Workplaces Review. There was some speculation last week that the government had decided to make certain changes to the Labour Relations Act as well as the Employment Standards Act. And just to get on the same page, can you outline what exactly those changes will be?
Well, what I can tell you is that there's a long list. I think it's 173 recommendations, if I'm not mistaken. There are a lot of recommendations in this report, and it was just released on Friday. We will be moving very soon to identify where we are going to make changes and where we're not, because we won't be implementing every single one of those recommendations. I had said that before the report came out, that we will be moving on some of them and not all of them. But what we do want to do is tackle that uncertainty that comes with part-time precarious work, the inequities of part-time and contract work, and how do we balance those concerns? There will be challenges around, or there are challenges around temporary work, and how do we make sure that people who are deemed to be temporary, but who actually aren't temporary, how do we make sure that people are being treated fairly? And we have said that we're concerned about the minimum wage, and we need to work with business to figure out how we tackle those vulnerable sectors, people who are really not able to make a living wage, and how do we make sure that we find a way to have a more equitable workplace.
Thank you.
So those are the principles behind what we'll be moving on.
Okay. Building on that, two areas of concern in particular for the Chamber of Commerce, and one of the, I guess, cornerstones of the issues that we've been focusing about recently has been the potential to bring back card-based union certification. Can you briefly shed some light on what your thoughts are as far as that goes?
Well, again, I don't want to preempt the announcements that we will be making, but just suffice it to say that we are focusing on people who are in vulnerable work sectors. So my guess is the majority of the people in this room will not be much affected by changes that we want to make, because you're running businesses, you're paying your people well, you're able to create a strong and safe work environment, and some certainty for your employees. One of the issues has been around scheduling, for example. That people can't predict when their schedules are going to be, and how do we balance that concern with the need for businesses to have flexibility. So we will be moving forward. We'll be coming out with our announcement, and so I don't want to go too far down that road right now. But just on the issues around minimum wage, particularly, I'm really concerned that we've seen an economy over the last decade or so where there are people who are doing very well and their income has been going steadily up. And then there are other parts of the economy that really have been flatlined. And I used the example earlier of personal support workers, developmental service workers, and early childhood educators. And as a government, we made a decision a few years ago that we were going to directly increase the wages of those groups because they were not seeing the increases that other public sector employees were seeing. So we actually put money into those wages to the exclusion of others because they were not keeping up. And so I see this moment in terms of the minimum wage particularly as a moment like that we need to find a way to help people catch up. Because even though we've had a minimum wage regime in Ontario for the last number of years where minimum wage increases have been tied to cost of living, we've never done that bump up that would allow people to actually earn a living wage. And so, again, we're looking at vulnerable people, people who you know in your community, you may know in your family, who are not able to get ahead and are not able to earn a living wage and are kind of teetering on the edge of desperation because they don't have security and they don't have an optimistic outlook. And so this is not about not working with business. It's absolutely about working business so that we can have the kind of business environment and society that that is going to benefit all of our community members, all of our families, and all of our families' families.
Thank you. One of the current concerns that we had as a chamber is over whether there's really the firm data in place to back up these policies. Will your government commit to an economic analysis of the impact of some of these changes before implementing them?
Well, I think that what you will see as we move forward, you will see that in some areas there's more data than others. There's no doubt about that. We'll work with the chambers across the province to tap into data that you have and to look at economic impacts. At the same time, as I said, we're looking at how do we create an environment where the most vulnerable workers in our society, the workers who have been the hardest hit by the pace of change, how do we make sure that they're getting a fair shake? Not that they are going to surpass their colleagues, but that they're able to keep up. But we'll absolutely be working closely with the chambers, and I know that there's already been outreach on the part of the chambers to the ministries and to the government.
Thank you. I appreciate that there is certainly much debate around the speculation concerning the $15 minimum wage that's been proposed. Can you shed some light on whether the government is considering a gradual increase of that up to the $15 an hour, or whether it would come all at once? Because I think that's one of the major concerns for small businesses, that would impact them dramatically.
Yeah. What I will say is that certainly we have had a robust conversation within government about this, and we'll be bringing out our proposal soon. And again, I know that the chambers across the province have had some input on that and on some of these other issues. Again, we'll be doing everything that we can to balance the need to support and help vulnerable people to catch up, and at the same time to make sure that business has the accommodation that they need. We brought out some changes on some proposals on Friday about offsets for businesses, recognizing that small business, there are regulations that small business is having a challenge dealing with. We're tasking ministries with, if they bring in a regulation that's going to cost businesses $1, they have to find $1.25 in offsets. We're looking at fees and licensing costs, those kinds of things. We're looking at supports for small business as they deal with government. So we are very aware that as we move forward with the changes to the labor laws and the work environment, that we need to also make sure that there are changes that are put in place that can offset some of those costs.
Thank you. I'd like to take the opportunity to open up to the floor. I know we're running a little bit behind on timing, so I'd like to have as much discussion as we possibly can. I would remind the audience to keep their questions respectful, but also we're having an open discussion, so please
Whatever.
I'm sure there's many...
It's a democracy.
I'm sure there's many electrifying questions that we'll hear in the discussion today. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead. Yes, we'll have a microphone, and I just ask you to introduce yourself.
Vic McAlnis. I'm with Morocco and Laurentian Mining Innovation Technology. So my question will be about mining. And welcome to the mining capital of Canada.
I'm in Sudbury. I could expect no less.
Absolutely. And mining has just survived the last 5 years, and we're a cyclical sector. And we're heading into a boom now, which is good news. All of the...
Although not the whole sector, right? If I'm correct?
Well, we're heading into a boom.
Metals? Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Some more some have already started quite,
It's great.
quite amazingly, and others are catching up. But mining does need some support. There's an amazing opportunity for us. I think you mentioned $60 billion in the Ring of Fire that's locked up in the wealth there. And all of the communities in the north really depend on mining and that sector being alive and well and taking us into the next decade. Could you give us some ideas about where you might take the mining sector? And may I also say that we're looking for a good champion in this area of Ring of Fire. I'm with the Sudbury Chamber of Commerce. We have a very lively group. And might I suggest that among all of the busy stuff that Glenn does for you, he might do more than just the energy side, but also the mining side of the Ring of Fire. Anyway, just a suggestion.
Thank you. There you go, Glenn.
First off, I'm taking back my $20, Vic. I never said. What the heck, man?
So let me just talk about the Ring of Fire for a sec, because it's such an important part of the mining future of the North and of the province. And you will know that we have worked for a number of years with the Matawa First Nations. It's very much my commitment and my belief that we are better off if the communities that are in the region, all of the communities can benefit and can be part of that economic development. And so that means a number of things. It means that people living in those communities need training, need social supports. I traveled to Webequie when I was Minister of Aboriginal Affairs and met with the community there. And since then, there has been training. There have been some health and social programs that have been put in place. So we've been doing that work, and it's very, very important. And there has been money put into those supports and into that work. What I've said to the Matawa First Nations now is that we need to come to some consensus, because we need to get infrastructure built. You know, there was a malicious rumor circulating that the $1 billion that we had committed to building infrastructure was no longer on the table. It is on the table. It is there. We want to invest it. We want to get that infrastructure built. But we need to come to some consensus about corridor and route and all of that. So I've said that all the good work that we've done working within a framework agreement, if there can't be a consensus at this point, then we need to start working with communities that want to work with us and get some of that building begun. And so that's where we are. Within weeks, not months, we're going to need to make some decisions around that. And I've been, as I said, I met with the Matawa First Nations just a couple of weeks ago, or not even 2 weeks ago, and made that proposition to them. And I think we'll find a way to move forward. Nobody in the province wants a shovel in the ground more than I do. So we will work with the communities, but with the broader community and with the businesses as well. And I think that's indicative of our commitment to mining in the province. Thank you. Councillor? Yes.
I'm Councillor Evelyn Dutra.
Nice to see you, Councillor.
Yes. I have two colleagues beside me, and we often talk about hubs. Yes. And I know that comes from you, from your office. And we really feel that we need hubs in a city like the city of Greater Sudbury and other areas. And I'm just wondering, like, what type of funding can we expect from government? We're finding that we're empowering our people, but our people need gathering places. Businesses do, but also the residents, and the more that we empower them, the more that they want to work together. We work closely with our older adults, and we find that housing issues are issues, mental health issues, healthcare issues, and with these hubs, we firmly believe, like I know in my area we had schools that were going to close, and we're grateful that they are not closing. My question to you is, how will government help us financially in capital expenses for hubs? Because that is so important for a community.
So we have an initiative that goes across government. Karen Petrie is my special advisor on community hubs, and if you haven't had a chance to talk to Karen, you should. You've met with Karen? Good.
Yes.
Great. And so the way I see this is that government can facilitate these processes. We pay a lot of money in, we invest a lot in health infrastructure, in health operations, in education infrastructure and operations. There are municipal dollars that go into programs municipally. If everybody can come to the table and can come up with a strategy. I mean, I'll give you an example where, for example, there's a school that is going to close, or there's new building that's going to happen in public health, for example. I think that what municipalities and school boards and local health integration networks, for example, need to be doing is at the beginning of a process like that, they need to pull everyone together to see if there are synergies, to see if there's a way for folks to work together. Now, that means that school boards have to work together. I mean, that's the starting point. It means that municipalities and school boards need to work together. That means Catholic and public school boards. It means municipalities working with Catholic, working with French, working with public, working with English, all of those interconnections. And that sometimes can be where the hub ends, because there isn't a willingness to do that. But where there is a willingness to do that, what we're trying to do is give folks some bridging money to help them to get past, for a year or 18 months as they get everything organized. We help to finance some of those transitions. That's the kind of funding that we are providing, because at the end of the day, already there's a lot of government money going into those services. It's just to get you to the point where you're all together, and then you can create the hub. So that's the kind of facilitation that we are trying to do. And it's not just about keeping schools open. It's about creating, as you said, Councillor, the best service to whether it's seniors or whether it's families or with kids, and doing that by having those services co-located.
If you permit me, what we're finding is that the lack of capital to retrofit the schools, like schools were built in communities, and I'm looking at the city of Greater Sudbury where we have different municipalities, but often it's that capital funding to retrofit that school, because I know Jocelyn and Bob and other councillors, we really want our people to have a meeting place. But not only a meeting place, but often it's the capital funding that we do not have to be able to do that. And I'm just wondering if the province will be looking at that.
So yes, I mean, there are situations where there's capital funding that can be provided. Sometimes it's a situation where one sector has some capital dollars, and those capital dollars, then we need to find a way to allow them to be spent differently. Whether it, if it's health dollars, how do you make sure that they can be spent on a hub? But that's where the specific expertise of the community hub secretariat comes in. I can't weigh in on a particular project, but certainly that's what Karen and her team are doing. They're working community by community, helping people to put those together.
Well, we're going to have you in Isilda today, and I'll talk to you about the Lionel Leela Loan Centre, which has become a hub, but we want to enlarge it. So
okay.
I'm glad for your answer. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you, Madam Premier. Sorry. My name is Kevin Jarvis. I'm a planner with Tulloch Engineering. And one of the biggest pieces of my job as a planner in Sudbury is to balance the social and the economic benefit of whatever project I'm looking at to come to some kind of best result at the end of the project. I want to touch again on the Ring of Fire question. Ring of Fire is an economic benefit. I don't think anybody in this room would argue that the Ring of Fire is an economic benefit. It's also a social benefit in the sense of bringing social benefit to First Nations in the area and bringing social benefit to the broader northern community through increased jobs and reduced social assistance needs. But one of the other things that I do as a planner here is I'm a business person. So one of the biggest questions that I ask as a business person is, what's the timeline and what kind of certainty do I have in the project that I'm working on? Those are two answers that we haven't heard yet today, Premier. First is the certainty question of, will there be shovels in the ground? And the second question is, by what time? Can you commit, Premier, to getting the Ring of Fire off the ground prior to the 2018 election?
So I I am working towards that. That has been my intention, that we would be able to come to an agreement, as I said earlier, that we'd be able to come to an agreement either with the broader Matawa First Nations and the businesses and all of the interests and start to move ahead, or find a way to work with individual communities, and that we would do that within the next year. That is certainly our objective. That $1 billion is money that we want to start to use and start to make those investments. And getting shovels in the ground on a transportation corridor is the fundamental aspect of that.
Thank you, Premier Wynne, for coming to Sudbury. My name is Robert Briette. I incidentally worked at the law firm that Michael was at for a period of 10 years. I left in 2006 to take over a family business that's been in operations here in Sudbury for 40-some years. My concern as a business person is some of these changes that your government is looking to implement, and I'll touch firstly on the workplace review, the 2 sick days, the increase in vacation. For us, we have about 38 employees in the one business. I own 2 businesses. Is approximately $50,000 impact. You indicated the cost of how much business we have to get in order to be able to pay that $50,000. We already pay 10 minutes in a coffee break that we don't get production. My huge concern for the sick days, and those are things you can't take back. And I welcome the comment that Michael made with regards to some type of impact, economic impact to small businesses. You indicated that your government is focused on protecting vulnerable people. Many of the small business owners in this audience and in everywhere are vulnerable as well. I have my whole financial being on the line. So if there's anybody that's vulnerable, I agree with the vulnerable people and the low wages. I'm extremely vulnerable. I live and die by my business.
Right.
The added cost, might as well take that $50,000 out of my pocket right now. And at some point, I've been in the last 2-3 years, there's the energy cost. We're talking about an extra $50,000 off my bottom line, out of my profits at the end of the day. The government has to look at what impact, because if your government allows some of these changes to take place, there's no coming back from that. And we bear that financial burden. It's not like if the government, through the Employment Standards Act, gives out 2 sick days and 3 vacation weeks instead of 2. It's not like you can take that back. And the financial impact, I wear that till the day I leave my business. And I'm thankful that in Northern Ontario we have the NOHFC, we have some funding opportunities, but those they're not given, they're not automatic. And the processes we're going through, we're successful in one of the businesses, we're in the midst of a second application, and we're thankful for those because that kind of helps bridge the gap. But some of these other changes that your government's looking to implement, they're going to be significant for small, medium enterprises. And we all know in Canada the importance of small, medium enterprises. So I would hope, and my comment and concern is around, before any of these changes are made, that they should look at the impact ultimately. Because you mentioned vulnerable people, and I agree with that. But I would hope that the government also considers how vulnerable we are as small, medium enterprises when most of us and anyone that owns a business is on the hook financially, personally. These vulnerable people can, they have the option of working somewhere else in a better environment with better benefits. But at the end of the day, I live and die by that sword.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. The reality is that some of the population I'm talking about actually don't have options. They can't just move, and they're caught. But I also am very cognizant of the small medium business concerns. I hear that. There are a lot of recommendations that the Changing Workplaces Review has put out. We'll be moving forward on some of them, not all of them. We'll be working with the business community. And in terms of NOHFC, I get that it's not automatic, but it is permanent, and we're very committed to continuing to put those supports in place and to recognize that there needs to be a special consideration for support for businesses in the north. I mean, that's what NIARP is about as well, right? And I know that not all the small businesses benefit from NIARP, but those are the kinds of considerations for northern realities that we will continue to support.
You mentioned energy, so I might be able to
Yeah,
say
do you want to say
something.
something?
Not that I was waiting for something.
I was going to turn to you
Yeah,
on
thanks. Thanks, Premier. Rob, nice seeing you. Rob and I go back, played hockey together, know each other since we were 10, so both getting grayer and a lot less hair on the top of our heads. So the energy component that you talked about was one of the things that we were really trying to drive forward with when it came to small businesses when we came forward with the Fair Hydro Plan. Now, I know City Welding probably uses more energy than what the Fair Hydro Plan would allow you to qualify for. I don't want to make any assumptions, so we can talk about that. And we got some great people at Greater Sudbury Utilities who are here, Frank and Wendy, who can also look at some of the programs that are out there. But there's 500,000 small businesses and farms in this province that are going to qualify for that 25% reduction. Many of them are in this room. The easiest way for me to explain that to you is if you are a time of use customer, you will qualify for the 25%. If you are not a time of use customer, then we do have other programs in place. One of them that has been utilized a lot is the Industrial Conservation Initiative, the ICI program. That was initially started to help out some of our larger industries, those that were using 5 megawatts of power. Then it was dropped down to 3. Last fall, we dropped that down to 1 megawatt, and now we've dropped it down to half of that, so 500 kilowatts, with those that will be specific businesses that would qualify for that. So there are a lot of programs that are now in place to help businesses reduce their energy consumption, and that's been my biggest frustration as the Minister of Energy as I go around the province, is we're lucky in the sense that we have a great utility here that works with the community, works with businesses to try and let them know of the Save on Energy program and the ICI program and other programs like that, so you can actually reduce your consumption and save money. But there are too many places that I go to that they have no idea. I will go there and we'll be giving them an award because they've changed their lighting. This was in Brant, for example, and it was an automotive manufacturing company. And they were getting an award because they saved about $200,000 a year. They were thrilled with that by changing their lighting and changing one of the ovens. And I asked them, I said, so you qualify, just seeing the size, you would qualify for the Industrial Conservation Initiative. How much do you save on your bill with that? And they said, the what? They had never heard of it. And so part of what I've been working with Debbie, I don't know if she was sitting around here somewhere. There you are, right in front of me, to talk to you about. Today was actually going to talk to all of our small businesses and medium-sized enterprises in this community about the programs that are available. And we were putting together a PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to work with the utilities because I want everyone to know about those programs. Because one of my frustrations, as I said, is if you don't know about it, you don't apply for it. If you don't apply for it, you don't get those savings. And so my job is now to make sure that we communicate effectively as possible, besides the Fair Hydro Plan and the 25% reduction, what programs are out there, what you can qualify for, and what we can do to help you lower your consumption, especially with a company like City Welding. So more than happy to work with you on that. Or anyone.
Thank you. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Councillor?
We got one.
There's somebody over there.
There's someone over here. We'll come back to you.
Hi there, thank you for coming today. My name is Allison Laking and I work for my family business. We have 4 local businesses in Sudbury. We employ approximately 108 employees and we have some significant concerns about the changing workplace review, specifically paid sick days and time off. We're looking about another 1,084 days of non-production that we will be paying for, that we're concerned about our employees bearing the burden of that. It's going to be too expensive for us to cover hiring 4 additional employees to cover the work that they're going to be missing just specifically by paid sick days and an additional week of holidays. So my question is, has the government seriously looked at the economic impact analysis for this particular area and this particular policy?
So I think that's related to the earlier question, and you know, again, we're looking to balance the the concerns of businesses that we want your business to thrive, and at the same time, we want people to be treated fairly and equitably. So we'll be bringing out our response to the report shortly. And as I said, there are a lot of recommendations in the report. We will not be following up on all of them, but we look forward to the discussion once we bring forward our proposals. Okay.
Dominic Giroux. We got Dominic. Give everyone a question, right?
Yeah. Premier, welcome back to Sudbury. Nathalie, bienvenue à Sudbury également. 2 months ago, Deputy Premier Matthews was here and met with Chamber representatives along with Mr. Thibeault. And one of the topics that emerged in the conversation was the need for to expand graduate programming in Northeastern Ontario. To support industry in areas such as engineering, earth sciences, to support the expansion of the MacEwan School of Architecture, to help with the revitalization of the downtown core, to support the medical school, it's an expansion of graduate programming, to support the hospital in terms of its research agenda. Yes, that's my plug for October 2nd.
I was waiting for
colleagues.
That, when's that going to come?
So it's more a comment and a wish. The government has recognized the need to increase graduate spaces in the north 3 years ago, and we've delivered on that agenda. There are only 3 universities in the province, Brock, Ryerson, and Laurentian, who have achieved their graduate targets this year. So when Minister Matthews came, she said, I hear the issue, I understand we need to invest more, that was a priority of the Chamber. So my question would be, would you remind Minister Matthews in the next few weeks as we finalize our respective strategic mandate agreements of the importance of continuing that graduate expansion because it lifts all boats from many sectors in the region.
Yes, and I will. I was going to say that it's in the strategic mandate agreement process that would be finalized. And yes, I will remind Deb, and congratulations on your new position when it comes. Félicitations.
Thank you. One more question, perhaps, if there is one. Debbie. Microphone's coming.
Thank you for joining us, Premier. It's wonderful having you back in Sudbury and here. One of the major challenges for businesses in Sudbury and Northern Ontario is access to skilled labor. And we find the challenge, we have a stagnant population in Northern Ontario, very slight increase in population in Sudbury. And some of the ways we've been thinking about increasing that access to skilled labor is through immigration. Unfortunately, Sudbury is not on the map when it comes to foreign trade professionals coming into our country and province. And I'm just wondering what the provincial government can do to try and attract more skilled labor into other parts of the province other than the GTA.
Well, I think that and this is an issue that has come up a number of times. I think it's something that we need to have a sort of collective strategy on. I think that there are multiple issues. There are social issues. There are cultural issues. I represent a sort of north end of Toronto riding. There's a community called Thorncliffe Park in my riding, and people in Pakistan and India know about Thorncliffe Park, and they come to Thorncliffe Park. They know where the mosque is. They know, they know families there. So there's a sort of predetermination to that kind of process. And so I think we need to have a conversation, an honest conversation about how do we interject ourselels into that process. What does that look like? Because it's actually not just about getting new immigrants to come. It's to get them to come and stay and put down roots. So, for example, I know a couple who live in Thorncliffe Park, and the husband travels to Nunavut, works in Nunavut as an engineer, and then comes back to Thorncliffe Park. But the family stays in Thorncliffe Park. So how do we find a way to create a different kind of incentive. And I don't have the answer to that. I'm not sure anyone has the answer to that at this point, but I think it would be something that some of the northern chambers of commerce might want to put on the agenda. When we go to the economic summit, for example, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, I think that would be a great session to have, and I'd love to be part of that conversation.
Can I add 2 bits to that? So part of, I think it was when Minister Matthews was visiting, we did talk about immigration. And so then I brought forward to Minister Albanese some of the concerns that we were saying in terms of shortages for skilled labor, but just in general. We've got, many fantastic post-secondary institutions here in Sudbury and across the north who are now bringing many foreign students into our communities. How do we ensure and incentivize these students to stay? And then Paul and I are working often, and one of the things that I had in my other life when I was at the federal level was we lost, and I know the Chamber was a big vocal advocate with me at that time to get our office back, and I know Paul is working hard on trying to make sure that we can get our citizenship and immigration office back here in Sudbury, because that office, while it was only open here for 3 days, it provided fantastic service, but then it did Timmins, it did Sault Ste. Marie, North Bay, it did this route. So it will be great, and not to put you on the spot, Paul, but it would be great if we can get the federal government to bring that back, because then that opens the federal doors, and we've got the provincial portals, and those two coming together I think is important for us in the north, because I've seen too many people right now saying, well, I've got to do all of this work to get my all of my immigration components completed, but I got to drive down to Toronto. So why the heck do I want to come and live up in Northern Ontario? Well, first off, it's beautiful. You don't have to get stuck in traffic for 45 minutes. Everything in Sudbury is 15 minutes, Premier. It's fantastic. And you can, swim and all that stuff right downtown. Don't need to do the promotion to this group. But anyways, it's important for us. The immigration piece is important. We've already started on it, and I keep hearing, and so Paul and I work on that together.
So maybe that's something we could get on the agenda of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and we could work together and pull in our federal partners in that discussion.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's certainly something we're looking forward to following up on.
Great.
So thank you both very, very much for being here. As a token of our appreciation, we have made a donation to the Greater Sudbury Chamber of Commerce Student Bursary Fund. Now, this fund is used as a bursary fund to each one of our post-secondary educations. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
I'd also like to acknowledge Councillor Robert Kerwin. I believe I forgot you earlier, so thank you very much for being here. And again, I'd like to recognize the sponsors of today's event, CN, Sudbury Integrated Nickel Operations, a Glencore company, Cambrian College, Collège Boreal, Huntington University, and Greater Sudbury Utilities. Thank you very much to our sponsors, and please enjoy your lunch today.
All right, thank you very much for joining us for that live coverage from the Sudbury Chamber of Commerce event featuring Premier Kathleen Wynne and Minister of Energy Glenn Thibeault. Head over to Sudbury.com now for full coverage on this and all of today's top news stories. For Sudbury.com, I'm Callum Roden.